Alright. Hey guys,
Hi there.
1 second. Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse. It's April 8th, 2026. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. For those of you who are new to Office Hours, this is where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community. Plus, a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. Now, real quick, before we get started, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse has developed the ultimate infrastructure as code framework. We call it Atmos. You'll hear us talk about it a lot on the show. So if you haven't heard about it or you're running Terraform and OpenTofu, check it out. It's a great way to do infrastructure. So just go to atmos.tools. So quick note on how to get the most out of today's session. The format is informal, so you can engage as much as you'd like, ask questions, and if you're curious about any of our open source tools like Atmos, this is a great place to ask. If you're watching the recording, keep in mind these calls are happening live, so you don't miss out. You can join us by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. Lastly, I have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. Just go over to youtube.com/cloudposse, where when our automation works, it'll be posted in roughly 2 to 3 hours. So that's what I got. Now, here's what caught my attention this past week. So I'm a huge proponent of Conductor. I love Conductor. I've opened hundreds of pull requests over the past 6 months since I've been using it. If you're looking for a agentic editor, Conductor is one of the most effective ones out there. Now, we've had a lot of conversation about this topic in particular. Everyone has their own tool du jour. This is mine. What's exciting here is they did just raise their Series A, built or raising 22 million to continue building kind of like the evolution of an agentic style editor. Now, yeah, it is interesting how, as much as I love this tool and I use it profusely, I I wonder if it's still going to be the future of editors or how we use AI. I don't know. I think the future's looking a lot more like paperclip or what Linear is doing with their project management app. What are you guys' thoughts? Are like to me the IDE is like a dying breed. The Kiros of the world, they were nice, but they assume that AI itself isn't evolving faster than how we ourselves are working. And I think that's why, what OpenClaw showed us, now I don't think OpenClaw itself is the future, but paperclip and that whole genre of working right now seems on par with where I think things are headed, where you are managing objectives, higher level execution, and then and orchestrating the agents across multiple frontier models or your own hosted LLMs and things like that. So, all right, check out Conductor otherwise, if you're not ready for paperclip. That's what I use. Um, next is so we've had a lot of talk about AI submitted PRs, feature requests in open source projects like curl, throwing in the towel and saying like that they're not just accepting it anymore. And it's interesting because the quality of those vibe coded submissions has varies wildly from being total slop to being legitimate. And lately, there's just been a slew of legitimate findings in the Linux kernel that have gone on for decades unnoticed, some of them. And now, like, so they talk about here how they used to get maybe 2 to 3, well, they used to, what was it? They're getting between 2 to 3 per week, maybe 2 years ago, and then that reached about 10 a week over the last year. And now they're getting 5 to 10 reports per day, often of the same vulnerability, by different people because the AIs are just working consistently at it. So what's interesting about this are some philosophical points down below here, where historically there have been embargoes on security reports, especially for open source software. And I think we can appreciate why that would be. Allowing maintainers to resolve the underlying problems before a disclosure so that it doesn't get immediately exploited. But if you're literally getting 2 to 3 of these submissions per day for the same exploit sometimes, it's almost not even it's not even secret anymore. Like if the good actors can get it as easily as the bad actors, then we should just assume everybody has it. So the value of an embargo is diminished. The other is that the nature of how you upgrade and when you update has to change because the rate of discovery of vulnerabilities is so great. Now, one other argument to this that I read and saw in it is that maybe what we're doing is like there's only so many new vulnerabilities that will probably be discovered because the rate of discovery of vulnerabilities is greater than the rate of development of the project itself. So maybe over time, this will come back down again to a normal level and it'll be some kind of a homeostatic system where the number of vulnerabilities isn't as great as it is today. Anyways, thoughts on this? It doesn't have to be about specifically kernel.org. I mean, the Linux kernel or this. Another small announcement on Atmos Pro. We haven't done any demos here yet on that, but for those early adopters that are using it, just wanted to call out we shipped audit log forwarding this week. This allows all the events in Atmos Pro to be sent out to a SIEM. We implemented the cloud events standard. It's an open standard for how to pass audit and logging events between systems. And we also did launch a little media kit for Atmos Pro. If you want to brand your repos, you can embed Atmos logos in there now. So Michael Jenkins, you shared this one. That AWS has launched support for S3 backed files in EFS. That wasn't how I understood the announcement, the way they wrote it, and it really made my head spin because they had recently talked about like native Fuse support for S3 anyways. So how is this any different? I don't have my head fully around it, but my understanding is this is now a way that you can access S3 as a mounted file system using EFS as the underlying technology. Paul, you're nodding your head. Do you have more on this one?
Yeah, Michael, if you want to speak to it first, since you nominated it, but I can.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just saw this when it caught my attention. And I mean, the first thing that I thought about was like being able to access large amounts of data that's already in an S3 bucket from an EC2 if you need to process it. I'm thinking like machine learning,
Yeah.
image processing, stuff like that. I've worked with folks that store a lot of images in S3 as backup, and then they move them to a file share so they can access them from a web server or whatever, because the S3 access in the past has been too slow. So if this is some way to sort of, I don't know, bridge that, maybe. The one thing that really kind of gave me pause as I read this is there's a line in here during the guy's example where he says, if you write to a file that's using this sort of file system, then it may be anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes before it's very, very eventual consistency, right? So if you have some sort of real-time application that's trying to do this, it's probably not going to be as performant as an EFS mount. So I wouldn't use it for that. Like I wouldn't I mean, I don't want to go into the whole architecture, but like web servers that use an EFS mount across a fleet of servers so that they can read and write from the same config and data store, right? I wouldn't use
Mhm.
it for something like that because your whole fleet would be out of sync. Um,
Yeah.
but for something where you're just like, you got a bunch of data on a server or on a file system, you need to dump it into a bucket. Yeah, sure. Or you need to pull it onto a server or process it or do something like that. Yeah, sure. But yeah, I wouldn't use it for real time stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting because S3 itself has now strong consistency, I believe, where they guarantee that an immediate read after a write is consistent. But I'm guessing
Mm,
that they couldn't do that with an actual POSIX style file system for performance reasons.
So
yeah.
the gotcha about what I think it's a good feature, and there isn't as much worry about performance because you have configuration there that allows you to. It's basically a cache, an intelligent cache, and you can decide that by default files over or objects over 128K are streamed directly from S3. So those will incur the latency, but you can also change that limit and lower it or increase it. But then it manages transparently a local cache of these. It's a bit from the sounds of it like the way iCloud Drive would be on your Mac, that there's a local cache of files that you don't worry about. You do pay to store them, so that's one of the gotchas. So depending how much you configure, the size you configure and how much stuff you have cached, you pay extra for that. I think it's 3 cents per GB byte month. And then the other gotcha is that there is a write cost, which is quite substantial because it's EFS. The pricing basically matches EFS. So I'm going to share the link from Corey. I've read like 5 or 6
Mm.
summaries of this. Most of them are not good. Corey's is from Corey Quinn.
I need
It's
to add, Corey's blog to my list of research.
you know
He has good stuff there. You're posting the link?
Yeah, I am right now. And so that has the rundown on pricing and but it particularly for reading and if you configure the cache, this is useful. He talks there also about how requests, this is the other the dark side of pricing, how requests are actually sized and how they map onto units of consumption. So all of those details are there. And this is the only piece I've seen that other than the price list itself that gets into that. So just consider the cost. But there isn't as much performance stuff to worry about if you configure the local cache well and use it well.
Yeah, this is a great write-up. Yeah.
Yeah, if nothing else, you can always follow the money and see if it makes sense. No pun intended.
All right. Let's see. So we covered that. And then in Amazon's quest to align ECS further to Kubernetes, now for managed instances for ECS, which is also a relatively new offering that they have added now managed daemons. Anyone familiar with EKS? This is basically daemon support for daemon sets on instances. Now, obviously, this wouldn't make sense for something like Fargate, where each task is running in its own virtual instance, you could say. And that's same for EKS. For example, if you're using EKS with Fargate nodes, node pools, you can't use daemon sets on those. I had to post this not because I found it interesting, because I find it comical. Every week for the last month on office hours, I announce another local stack vibe coded alternative, and this week as well. So I couldn't believe there's yet another one. This time it's called Kumo. And I messed up the URL there, but just as well. It's on Reddit. Check it out, front page. Um, I, I'm surprised about the kinds of things that we see getting developed in parallel concurrently now with, as the cost of development has gone to zero. Michael, do we have Michael Rosenfeld here? We don't. I didn't have a chance to read up on the postmortem. He shared this in the Office Hours channel. We brought up obviously the Axios vulnerable supply chain attack that they themselves were bit by as a result of the I think the Trivia hack was it. Anyways, here's the postmortem of what happened with Axios. Michael, do you have any, or Paul, did you guys read this one by any chance? Or
I skimmed that, but I want to ask in general, like now or perhaps later, whether folks are have already been or aren't enabling GitHub immutable release text, because that seems, at least for the trivia attack, and I think this was also a factor in this one, to be a major question. And I'm seeing a surprising number of heavily used stuff, even AWS published stuff that has had updates in the last few weeks and that is still not on immutable tags. So I'm kind of curious, what are people doing?
so yeah, I mean, we enabled immutable tags, I think last year at some point. We also enabled tag rule sets that can control who is able to even manipulate or create tags. So I feel a little bit better about that. I'm not sure though if those are GitHub Enterprise features or are available like for GitHub Teams. Um, and maybe it's available for open source. I would assume that that would be an option. But yeah, it's a very good thing to enable in even if you're not doing open source. So what we do is we manage a lot of organizational rule sets, and then ensure Semver tags are immutable. So we created a rule set that any tag matching a certain pattern um, cannot be replaced. But I will say all of this lately has made us extra skittish about things and doing a lot of precautions lately, battening down the hatches and um, yeah, cleaning up. All right, that was that. And then yeah, it is worth mentioning step security. Uh, we uh, we haven't rolled it out yet everywhere, but and I say this with a grain of salt. Like the Trivia hack is a perfect example of it. Like Trivia, a tool itself meant to help protect and prevent security incidents, is itself the tool used to perpetrate a security a hack. Step Security is another tool in that category. Their record is much better, and their record is known for finding things like the Trivia hack. They have their own tooling that is free for open source, and they also have some really interesting actions that you can add to your runners, that you can add to your workflows that harden your workflow itself by enacting things like IP table rules to block certain outbound connections by default and so forth. So something I would like to spend a lot more time on, but the whole category of things has made me sour a little bit on too many actions. Any more comments on this one? Oh, yeah, Noel was saying regarding that hack, I believe there was a social engineering component that that a core engineer, core maintainer had been phished, and that led to something getting exfiltrated. So that's that. Cover that. I don't think I brought this up last week. So one of the things that we added support for in Atmos, I believe the release has not been cut yet for this. April, no, this should be released. No, I think this blog post is not current. The date. We have not cut a release yet for this, but AWS announced the ability to log into any IAM user and get short-lived STS credentials, the STS tokens, just like you can with single sign-on or assumed roles and so forth. This is nice because historically, in order to use an IAM user, you had to have static credentials and at best an MFA token together with that. Now you don't need that. And the default behavior with Atmos auth will be if you specify a kind of identity as AWS user, it will automatically use the Webflow. So this is nice because you can use IAM users securely leveraging this if you're not using single sign-on. Any questions on Webflow for AWS users, IAM users? And the last thing, we did have some other things coming out. So as you know, we've been having a lot of announcements related to Atmos AI. It was made possible by implementing a layer inside of Atmos that we can plug in new functions and functionality. For example, every Atmos command now supports a -- AI flag, which gives a human readable response to any command you execute. Good for new users. Well, the next thing that we're doing, this is to scratch our own itch, our own need. We do a lot of work with regulated companies, a lot of work with companies that use obviously Atmos, since that's what we do, but also the AWS suite of security oriented products. So Security Hub, GuardDuty, Inspector, Macie, etc. AWS has Security Hub, which is great, but it's more flashy than useful. It doesn't tell you how to fix anything. And the beautiful thing when you use Atmos, which is a framework, is it's conventional. So what we've been able to do now is if you tag your resources with the stack and component, which Atmos makes it very easy because you can define your tags as an import that get automatically added then to every single piece of infrastructure you deploy. Then you can leverage Atmos AWS Security to analyze the findings on Security Hub and tie it back to your components that you have so that you know where to make those changes and fix them. So everything is just building on each other and snowballing, and really excited about this because you can then define a skill for how you want your reports to look. And then those can be prompts to Claude to fix it, or it can be something that you convert to a PDF and share internally with management. It could be something that if you're a consultant, you use to prepare a free assessment for your clients, etc. The list goes on. Obviously, this builds on the fact that we're using Atmos. It's not a generic security tool. If you're building your infrastructure with Atmos as an IAC framework with Terraform and so forth, this will work very well. Any questions on this?
Just a comment, this looks really impressive, and the link to tagging allows for some durability. Many of these recommendation engines of all kinds, and I saw one recently.
There's so many.
But they're just drive-by. And the fact that you're combining this with tagging allows kind of a longitudinal view of this. You can look at that component and see how has it evolved, and are you remediating these recommendations? So it looks very good. I'm not an Atmos user, but I would definitely recommend this to people because this is really good thinking, and it allows for ongoing review, not just one-off because of the tags and the association.
Yeah, kind of completing the loop, right? Yeah, it's just building into what's there. And then, obviously where we're going from here is then these findings can then be surfaced in a manner where we can report on them, and then showing the time to remediation, and then your pull request is the evidence that that finding was resolved.
So,
So
so sorry, just to check, does leverage Security Hub in behind though. So you pretty much have to have a control set enabled um, to feed this, right?
exactly. And so what we're doing is we're building it in under the AWS namespace within Atmos. And this is leveraging capabilities of the AWS cloud, right, to be able to do this. And yes, everything you said is accurate. This is not building in another layer for scanning for compliance or things like that.
Well, that's cool because it's always been hard to use Security Hub directly, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, props off to Andre on our team. This has been his kind of passion project for the last month or so, and working on it on the side. So we are excited for this to be coming out. Also, I think that this is merged. This is in main right now. We have not cut the release yet. So I think that release will go out today or tomorrow. That'll include this. Um, all right, so that was that. A minor one, which is if you use Atmos auth, uh, anybody using commands in GitHub Actions is familiar with your GitHub Actions looking something like this. A lot of shell foo that manipulates the output into whatever format you need. Well, we are trying to rid our workflows of that for very clean experience using Atmos in CI. So you can now just specify the format of the output of the end that you need, and we added a GitHub format. GitHub's environment format is a little bit unique. It's not strict like .env style. So this respects the syntax of the GitHub outputs. And that's nice because once you output the auth environment variables, now subsequent steps can just operate that way. This is maybe not the best example because you don't need to combine this with this. This will automatically do this. A better example here would have been showing how you can run this and now just use the AWS CLI as the next command. One of the small changes we made, so we did announce Atmos AI, I think a month or so ago, a month and a half ago, and that was predominantly based on interacting with the AI APIs directly. This is a minor change that allows you to then instead just use your CLI directly. So you don't need to configure Atmos to talk to the APIs, but also you can use the strength of like the Claude CLI itself as a workaround. So you can specify a provider like Claude Code, and then it'll execute that. We also added built-in support for running the MCPs. Things are moving fast. I provided a gist here that showed how you can run MCPs in Atmos just using custom commands. And this is a nice example of something that we're just doing everywhere now. If you're using Claude or any agentic editor, first, MCPs they're not going away. They're very convenient for specific things, especially when you need to talk to APIs. MCPs reduce the number of tokens to perform the same kind of operation typically compared to using a command. But you can also use commands sometimes. That brings me to the next thing. The next thing that makes using MCPs, or makes your AI agent more intelligent is giving it a skill, and the skill tells it how to use a bunch of commands. But rather than tell it how to do a bunch of shell foo, pipe, grep, awk, this to get the output you need, what we do is we leverage Atmos custom commands extensively So in our repos, we still have the shell foo, right? Because we're not going to reinvent every single thing under the sun. But what's nice about this is now I can just run Atmos, MCP, AWS, install, and we have one command to do that. And if I take a look over here at our infra live repo, I'm not signed in this tab. Oh, and this window doesn't even have session access. That's a bummer. Well, I'll show another example. So in the Atmos repo itself, one of the things we've done is in the atmos.d folder is we stash a bunch of commands that we use for our own local development working with Atmos. So like a dev namespace, so we can run Atmos dev dash dash help, and we see all the dev commands. And then these expose other frequently used operations during development. So then what we do is we just create a skill that says, hey, use any of these dev commands to perform those operations. Then you don't need all that context in your skill files, and they're usable and repeatable by any developer on the team, and your AI can use it, and you can use it, and you can just run Atmos, whatever, dash dash help, and see the commands available. So it's a very convenient pattern that we've embraced for development using Atmos. And then Noel, you've been using Atmos MCP. So that's using Atmos as its own MCP server for itself. Now what you can do is with the announcement that I'm just talking about here is in the change log. Now you can just also run the MCP servers as well that you would be running in this cloud environment. So you can configure your MCPs for IAM, security, pricing, billing, cloud trails, etc., and let Atmos spin those up. And it works with Atmos auth, so you can specify an identity that you're using here. So that's the other problem with MCPs is how do you get them the credentials they need to perform the operations that they're going to do? And if you're operating in a cloud environment, you probably want to be a little bit more careful about what those credentials are. So this allows you to do that. Yep, check that out. Let's see any other announcements here. So if you are using Atmos native CI, we've further invested in simplifying that to make it just the best way to work with Terraform in GitHub Actions. So previously, you had to at least have this much shell foo or Go templating to use describe affected inside of your GitHub Action workflows, which is ugly. But we have now made Atmos describe affected CI aware. So you can just run this in your GitHub Action workflows now to get the same outcome. And then I should have had a change log for this. But in our examples, we added an advanced example now for native CI that shows how you can use describe affected as a matrix step here, or to generate the matrix that you then use in the subsequent step as well. What else I wanted to show? The other thing we did was in our native CI example here. This is the one. So I've been calling this ECS V2. We've renamed it just to call it native CI because that's more what we're using it for, to showcase the capabilities of Atmos when you use it in CI. And we've done an overhaul on the workflows again, simplifying them and improving them. Recently, we did a stress test, you could say, running a matrix. Well, it wasn't actually. It was using Atmos Pro to dispatch roughly 2,000 plans concurrently. And then we realized we were hitting other kinds of rate limits on GitHub. One of them was installing Atmos. So here's a very efficient way to run Atmos in your workflows. Um, ah, did I think I didn't merge the pull request yet then. Where is it? Well, maybe I didn't do it. Maybe I only did it on the advanced example then. So let me go back to the advanced example for the feature branch and highlight some things here. So this is doing a container. This is using a container as the runtime for this job called build in this case. And we don't need to then install Atmos via like the setup Atmos action, and we can just plug and play running Atmos. In this case, we're running Atmos off. Now you see this shell foo here. That's the thing we don't want anymore. That's why we cut that. We have a new release coming out this week where we can change format.env to format GitHub since .env was incompatible with GitHub environments. And then using that auth subsequently for the Docker build and push to ECR. All right. Any questions on those announcements? All right, that's all I got for today. Any other interesting topics we can discuss today? Checking the Zoom chat.
I wanted to share something. I'll post it right now. It's a LinkedIn comment. Often these are not very substantial or LinkedIn post by a gentleman named Yaroslav Naumenko. And it's something that seems very basic, but there's good advice there, and I added more to it. It's about securing Terraform state files in S3. And he discusses things that I think many people will miss, like a customer managed encryption key, and then other safety settings there for AWS S3. He talks about other clouds too. Forget the Terragrant part, whether or not people use that. That's material. It's
Sacrilege.
I have no opinion about it. I don't use it, but the basic advice is really useful. And I added a comment there about a feature, an AWS IAM policy language feature that probably most Terraform users don't know about or just don't use because we have variables in Terraform. But you can generalize this structure and avoid repetition and have one bucket or a smaller number of buckets and multiple state files that are stored securely and completely isolated without the need to explicitly iterate over stuff in Terraform by using IAM policy variables. And I give some examples, and there's a link in the second comment because it's short for the documentation, but I'll post that link as well. It's really useful.
I want to learn more about that. That sounds interesting. I don't think
it's another way of doing repetition, but at an AWS level, it applies in lots of contexts, but really worth saves a lot of time.
Does this save you? Is this a trick to get around the policy size limit of the IAM document?
Not specifically, no. I mean, I suppose you could use it that way. That's a good use of it. But what I have in my personal or my very simple organization, no question. But I actually have I use the policy variable so that I have separate Terraform state file permissions by account in the same AWS bucket. I don't have to do anything. When I come in from a particular account, I can only see state files and only manipulate state files for that account in my S3 bucket without any repetition, any config.
That is cool.
That's very simple, but you could do it with org paths. You could do it like in a corporate setting. I suggested there the variable you'd use is or AWS colon or the variable and a condition organization paths, and so you could do very sophisticated things like just this OU automatically has access to this set of tags or
basically or a path or a path prefix essentially in the bucket.
Yeah.
Wow. We've because we've gone down that road and tried to solve it with IAM expressions, which are brittle and you're limited at wildcards. And the problem we've had is when you have a lot of accounts and you're enumerating the list of accounts with that expression, we hit the policy limits. So I think you just solved a problem for us on that.
So glad to work with anyone. I have some, I don't know if I have an example in any of my code bases. It wouldn't be about storing Terraform state in my case, but I'm glad to work with anyone or collaborate with anyone who wants to experiment with this in this context. I'm happy to share individually the really simple setup of my my state bucket, but just in general to work on this because it's just a new way. Well, not a new, it's been there for many years, but it's a for Terraform users a new way of handling repetition without iteration.
Yeah, I like it.
I have
I
one.
like it also because it's set it and forget it, right? You can define it once as an org admin, more or less, and then you allow this bucket for individual accounts, and it alleviates part of the cold start problem.
Yeah. And I want to share one other thing, which is unrelated. People we probably mentioned it in office hours, this Lambda managed instances feature that was announced. It's been
Yeah,
about 2 months.
we briefly talked about it. You probably spent more time looking at it. I was curious if you use if you use instances, then do you still have the same timeout problems? Can you have long running Lambdas then?
No, you're still subject to the 15 minutes,
Oh,
but there is Lambda durable functions, which can exceed 15 minutes as long as they're not, as long as the functions are invoked asynchronously. If they're invoked synchronously, which is the case with event source mapping. So if you do SQS to Lambda, using the AWS infrastructure of an ESM, then it's still limited to an aggregate 15 minutes, which is really weird to me. But so separately from that, this gentleman, he's another AWS community builder, this morning published a really, really good summary that helps you to fit managed instances. I'm opposed to managed instances for Lambda. It seems to be against the idea of serverless, but he's actually making me rethink that because he situates it on this continuum of different architectures for compute and talks about really a lot of the gotchas that people could run into and how to decide. I thought it was a really good piece. It's long, but very substantial.
very interesting. Right, max invocation. Okay. No limit, Fargate. Okay, okay, the other way is to run a container, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the durable Lambda durable functions do if you as long as the Lambda function is invoked asynchronously, and as long as you bother with this custom API that AWS programming language like Python level API that AWS provides, you can get past the 15-minute limit. But at that point, I start to think, well, use ECS or EKS or use step functions or use something that's better suited.
Yeah.
But people like that. I don't know. I haven't. I'd be afraid. I'd really be afraid in that case of lock-in, but it's there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Any other good material, Paul?
That's a lot to digest, so I'll stop there.
Yeah. Anyone have questions for Paul? Any other questions we can help anyone here sort through? Noel, have you cracked the isolation problems on Kubernetes for your sandboxing service?
Yeah, I wrote a custom hypervisor and a container runtime. And yeah, yep, I did. Um it was harder than I thought, but also easier than I thought. And I talked to a few different people at KubeCon actually about this. I talked to Unicraft, and then there's a company who's does something similar to what I built, but as a commercial product.
Mhm.
And I used a bunch of their open source tool set to help me build what I needed. But yeah, it's once you start letting people into your actual compute, things really get weird. And then if you want like a real development environment on top of that, like everything to be similar to how it would be on your workstation, there's a lot. But yeah, that was Edera is the one company, Edera, and they do a Zen hypervisor and a container runtime. It's called Adara Protect. And I've tried to do like use the Unicraft stuff, but for like a full-on workspace, the Unicraft unikernels approach doesn't actually really work that well. And I found a bunch of places where it just yeah, it's not going to work. So yeah, I will. I've got a few articles I'm working on. I'll definitely share them with you guys once I'm there.
Yeah, yeah, share those when those are available. Just reminded me this change on have an update. Yeah. Cool. Anyone have any projects they're working on they'd like to share, specifically open source projects or the like?
And I just shared a link. Mila Jovovich from the Fifth Element worked with a developer and put this out yesterday, and I forked it and put in Postgres support because I wanted Postgres support. But it's kind of interesting because it has like the best eval for memory context service. It's pretty cool.
I
Yeah,
can't keep it all straight. There just seems to be so many of these memory services coming out. How do you evaluate?
I guess that there like actually is an eval. Right. So this one scores the best. And it's
Oh,
kind of
gotcha.
it has an interesting architecture to it as well. Um, like very simple MCP service, but it has a few different layers and then a few different algorithms in it that seem to just make it work better. So I'm gonna I put in Postgres just because I use Postgres everywhere and it's easier than the Chroma DB. But yeah, I'm gonna try this out and see how it really actually helps improve things.
Can it also just work with SQLite or something?
Yeah, that's what the Chroma DB, I think the dev version local is just like a SQLite type of thing. I don't know. I haven't used Chroma DB at
Hmm.
all before.
All right.
yeah, I'm
Any,
definitely looking at Mim Palace myself, and I'm still not ready to write up or quite share the work I'm doing on domain managed specs and AI stuff, but it's getting there. I'm learning a whole lot about different spec like kits that are out there. But I still prefer open spec, and I've been just slowly but surely iterating on making agents respect and create contracts with each other. And it's pretty neat to see that come together. I don't know if anybody else is trying to do that, but hopefully there should be something soon that I can say I feel this works because it still ends up having a little bit of trouble to tighten the reins on it.
yeah. Has anybody been kicking the tires on paperclip? I briefly tried it out, but
Oh, I'm still on that too. And in fact, I had a hilarious scenario where I've had to change the app a lot because I had the CEO fighting with the CTO over they have a really funny thing that they do. So when you're managing stuff, it's easier to tell the lower level um sort of managers, if you will, to hire, set up hires, but they can't hire, right? So then I told the CTO, hey, you need to hire somebody who can do project some
project management and you need to hire one more tester. So they do. And then they come back and they ask the CEO to do it. The CEO says, I did it. They go and they check, but the way that they made the paperclip API, it shows you everything about the hire except for agent settings and other stuff. So when I ran it, there was just one time, a blip where that particular provider that was picked wasn't available. And so then the CTO was like, well, I don't see any provider settings, CEO. You need to fix the settings. And it was just like, and they went back and forth. I had not noticed this for like a day. When I came back and they had a whole thing where the CTO had to write up for me on how the board needs to get rid of the CEO. That's great. I had such a laugh about that. But then
Oh
I
my
went to the
God.
API and I just said that you can have read-only access to that. And then the whole thing got dropped. It was hilarious. But I have to say that was probably my favorite story out of Paperclip so far, is that I'm having to adjust the API so that they don't think that, hey, this person's two-faced. And I went and I looked and the soul.md that was generated for the CTO was to be sort of a little bit audacious and protect your project above all costs. And that was pretty much what was causing it. So it's like, okay, it's hilarious.
That is hilarious. And when you're doing all of this, what who I assume you're going through Open Router?
Yeah, that's the way to keep
Eh,
it affordable. I've seen that, it might cost me $6 a day to run if I really truly, have something there. And it depends on the specs.
And which providers are you using on Open Router then?
I use about three or four. So there's I think primarily I like the higher level management to be Kimi 4.5, I think it is. And that has okay performance. And then for implementers, I typically use Minimax. I found that Minimax 2.7 is good with a lot of tasks now. And then I use StepFun and Mercury 2 for a lot of really simple test work because they fly. Like if you look at the tokens per second, they're able to just bounce back from tests as fast as a tool can finish running unit tests. But I find that for long running tasks, they don't tend to handle large context well. So I think that they might, if I was going to go back and if I was give advice to anybody here, I would say if you do run those, just reduce their context. Maybe one other one that I was fielding, and I know it's big now, is that there is, I think it's called Mimo by gosh, I forget
Xiaomi?
the name. Oh yeah, yeah, Xiaomi. I was really surprised that they had a whole thing. I think that Flash is pretty good for the speed. And I want to say Pro is kind of at Claude level for much cheaper. But they both seem to, again, they tend to be a little bit aggressive on what their context can take. I tend to tune it back to be less context, and you might just mess with it and see, and then just
So,
have tool automation around that. Mhm.
the Pro looks like it has a 1 million token context, but are you saying that it's not effective or
Oh, I would say at about a quarter of that, you might start to see reasoning kind of drift, and it'll start to consume more tokens than it should take. So
Hmm.
we're talking about, like, is it effectively solving the problem, or do you need something to compact all of that context and really rebucket it? And
Yeah,
and a lot of times that's what I find I'm doing is with paperclip, you want tasks to be almost, you want a timeout, in fact, where you just say, hey, this stuff should be small deliverables, rotate tickets quickly,
yeah,
and that's, I mean, there's going to be long running tasks, but then you have a couple different providers that are good at that. I've tried Quinn, by the way.
hmm,
I think Quinn, it has its moments, but I haven't found it to be consistently better for the price. I think that's the problem, is I think Quinn is a little too expensive for what it does versus, say, Minimax or or Kimmy.
Okay.
But that's, my feedback, my 2 cents. And I've been using OpenSpec the whole time, so I have usually an OpenSpec auditor and a few other things. I've done infrastructure as code with them. In all cases, I've Dockerized all of it, and I've just given them the ability to pull a repo and then the ability to sort of submit a push request of sorts. I use something like patching, and it's been pretty neat. I kind of think it's got legs, but I don't think it's ready when the agents are they do tend to fight, and they do tend to rework stuff as soon as you give them a large project. Now, uh, if you're going to do it right now, make sure that you start with a product manager that knows how to create milestones and roadmaps, and do that, and you might get a lot of productivity out of it. Um, but yeah, that's my way too long spiel. I know we only had 2 minutes now.
Oh, thanks for the background. That reminded me about that Anthropic also has announced that their next frontier model, Mythos, is well, it's in preview, not accessible to most people. And it might be some time before it comes out. I can't, I don't know where I read some of some of the reasons why it's not GA yet. It was too good at manipulation.
Yeah, I do think Claude overthinks a lot for me.
Yeah. Cool. Anyone have anything to add? I think we are at time. I lost track of time. So we'll be posting a recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. It'll be there in a few hours. If you ever need any support from Cloud Posse, our whole open source ecosystem is backed by commercial support. We have hundreds of Terraform modules and the Atmos IAC framework. If you need any help, check out our support offerings. If you want to get involved with our community, we have lots of resources. These office hours, are free for anyone to join and attend and ask questions. Go to cloudposse.com/office hours to subscribe. We have our YouTube channel, our Slack community. Just go to cloudposse.com/Slack, and our monthly newsletter. You can subscribe to at cloudposse.com/newsletter. So thanks, everyone. Have a great Have a great rest of your week. See you next week.